Now I'm going to ask you an awkward question. If you had a magic wand and you could rewrite our life as a family, would you have wanted me to be born sighted?
Hmm.
Hello, and welcome to a new episode of What It's Really Like with me, your host, Molly Burke. Today is an interesting one, a very special one. I know that a lot of people who follow me are parents of blind or disabled children, and I can't speak to that. I can speak to being a blind child, but I can't speak to raising one. But you know who can? My incredible parents. They are here in LA visiting, and I thought it'd be nice to sit down and chat with them about what it was really like raising me with a progressive eye disease. So we're going to cut. I don't know how the edit's going to happen, if we're just going to play all of one and then all of the other, if we're going to splice between them. We're figuring it out. So without further ado, here are my incredible parents. Okay, well, here we are, Neve.
Hello, Molly.
I am sure everyone is so excited to hear Mama B's voice.
Here we go. Well, some of them maybe.
Okay, well, this feels incredibly weird to be interviewing my father, not to give too many spoilers. But let's start by asking a simple question.
Mm-hmm.
Who is Neve Burke?
Neve Burke. Neve Burke. Maybe I don't know.
Ooh. Ooh. Wow, we're getting deep off the bat.
Who's Peter Burke?
Who is Peter Burke?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, so I am a only son of 4 children. So I had 3 sisters. My parents were Irish immigrants. So I was the first one in my family born in Canada. I've always lived permanently in Canada. My elder sister was born in the Middle East, in Bahrain, where my parents were living at the time. And my other sister was born in Ireland on their way to Canada. And then I had a younger sister who was also born in Canada, who sadly passed away when I was 13 years old and she was 11 of childhood leukemia.
Which we will circle back to because I feel like there's a really interesting link there between Jenny's cancer and then later my RP. Well, if I was asked who is Neve Burke, I might say she's a free spirit.
Thank you. Yes.
She's
Forgot about that one.
A wife and a mom,
Yes.
an entrepreneur.
Yes.
She is a very compassionate, little bit woo-woo.
Love that. That's the fun part.
Yeah. That's who I would say Neve Burke is. But who would you say?
I'd probably mimic you and say, first and foremost, wife, mother, free spirit when I can be, entrepreneur for sure, enjoy life, and that's probably it.
Your childhood grew up mainly in Canada with, like you said, Irish immigrant parents and 3 sisters until you were 13. Then you went to university. You were a party boy.
I may not have been as focused on my studies as my sisters were. That's true.
It's one way of putting it. The wild child of the family. You did a lot of dating around before meeting the love of your life.
I wouldn't say a lot of dating around, but I did go through a period where I was confused in my relationship status. So I would start a relationship sometimes before ending the other one.
Yes, we do call him the OG F-boy. So, unfortunately, those are my genetic roots along with RP.
The times have changed.
Now you've been happily married for, 36 years?
I think so, yeah. We got married in 88, 89, one of those two. It's in my calendar, so I never forget. But yeah, long-term happy marriage.
And now you're a grandpa.
Yes, that's very exciting.
But I don't think you and Eve, what's so interesting, I feel like the older generations didn't talk so much about the idea of having kids when they were like getting married. Like I hear a lot of older couples are like, wow, we never even talked about if we wanted kids before getting married. Whereas nowadays, I feel like it's like everybody, that's like a big topic of discussion when dating. It's like, do you want kids? What do you see in your future? But you and Mom, from my understanding, like never really deeply talked about that before you were like actually married and then like, should we do this?
So we definitely didn't have like a lot of deep conversations around like, do you want children or any of that kind of stuff, even, well before we got married. And then once we were married, we did have a kind of a conversation about it. And he was like, I think I'm ready to start a family. Like, what about you? And then I kind of thought about it and I was like, okay, well, right now we can, drop everything and go away for a weekend if we want. We can go out anytime we want. We can do anything we want. No restrictions. Knowing all that changes when you have kids. And so I thought about that long and hard. Well, not that long, not that hard. But I suddenly realized like, am I ever going to be ready to not be able to have that? And I was like, yeah, no, I'm not. So I just kind of went to Neve one day and said, you know what? I'm not really ready, but I don't think I ever will be. So let's just give it a whirl and I'll adapt.
And that's how Brady Burke, my older brother, was brought into the world.
Yes.
He was born October 25th, 1991.
Correct.
And then somewhere along the lines, raising him as a toddler, you made the mistake to decide to have a second child, who you sit in front of today.
Indeed.
What was Brady like as a baby?
He was it was a sweet little baby that was. Now, Neve may have different recollections because I do distinctly remember when people would say to me, how is Brady sleeping through the night? And I'd be going like, oh, he's sleeping through the night. And then they would meet Neve and they say, so Brady's sleeping through the night. And she'd be like, no, Peter's sleeping through the night. I'm getting up 3 or 4 times.
Peter.
It was kind of embarrassing.
Tut, tut, tut. And yet she still decided to give it a whirl and have number 2 with you.
We rolled the dice. It's like being at a craps table.
And you lost. So out pops Molly after 9 busy months in the womb. And I'm curious, what was I like those first few weeks and months?
Well, for the first day or 2, you were nameless. You were like a no-name child because we couldn't land on the name. And we finally did settle on Molly, which was always my favorite. And you were, I think, a pretty good baby as well. Like you were good. And there was like normal kind of baby stuff. Lots of crying, wanted to eat on demand.
Normal baby stuff until it was not normal baby stuff.
Yes.
And what was the first sign of trouble for you? What do you remember looking back on and realizing something's not quite right?
The cord was wrapped around your neck when you were supposed to be coming out of my body.
Whoops.
So that was like, okay. And everything was really good. For many years, you were a really easy baby, easy child. There was nothing kind of abnormal, except when your granddad came over. I'm sure your dad explained that.
So I think it was my parents were over, I think on a Sunday, and we were having them over for dinner. And my dad, who's now passed away, but always adored children and always had a soft spot in his heart for actually baby girls. And he had you on his knee, and I think you were about 9 months old. And I think he was like kind of bouncing you on your knee, and then he would stop. He used to do this bouncy, 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 bouncy thing to make kids laugh. And then he sort of said, I'm just noticing that her eyes are moving rapidly in her head. And if they're not moving rapidly, her head is bobbing. And that was kind of the first trigger and he was like, I think you guys should get this looked into.
And we didn't notice at all.
It's like I was possessed.
And from there on in, it got very interesting. And there was a mystery to be solved as to why this was all happening. So I brought it to our doctor, who was concerned, but by the end of the day, just phoned me and said, everything's fine. It's just a temporary thing. It's called spasmus nutans, and it'll just fade away. I was like, okay, great, phew. And then there were some hints along the way from maybe a grandmother kind of saying, she should get more. Oh, because we started noticing when you reach out for things like a cookie or a spoon that your hand was flying in the air and going by the cookie. And again, you're just so busy with 2 young children. It was like, that's odd. And then you would go to a little friend's house to be babysat with their kids. And the mom would say, Molly was having a hard time coming down the stairs. Like, it's as if she couldn't see the stairs. And again, it would go in and out of my head. And it was like, what's for dinner? What's the plan for tomorrow? So as a parent, I just couldn't seem to see that there was an issue, but I knew there was something, but it was so busy that it didn't register.
So that was kind of the start of the long journey to eventually getting a diagnosis.
And it was a long journey. I started going to Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto in neurology when that first symptom appeared, and then eventually we shuffled down to ophthalmology, which is where we'll circle back. One really interesting thing is that what was now the ophthalmology wing at Sick Kids had been the oncology wing where Jenny went. So that was a weird...
I was never, candidly, I could never step into Sick Kids without feeling ill. Ever.
I'm sure.
So
it's a lot of your own trauma from childhood, resurfacing, particularly because it was the exact same wing. So to now see probably your own daughter going there is probably very overwhelming.
Yeah, it was because, Jenny had been under remission, but then when she went back into Sick Kids, she never left again. And I have a lot of very powerful memories to this day about being told what was likely to happen and that kind of stuff. So yeah, that stepping into that hospital was always a difficult thing, even though it's, a phenomenal facility.
Mm-hmm.
The staff, the doctors, everybody in that hospital is amazing. It is clearly one of the best children's, if not the best children's hospital in the world. But for me, yeah, held a lot of trauma.
Meanwhile, I was going back and forth to Sick Kids and getting different tests and trying different things. And then one day, Dad got the phone call.
Yes, before that happened, I was in the class when you were in JK, SK. What would be that in?
Yeah, the year before grade 1.
The year before grade 1. And I was in to help, and I noticed that you weren't writing with the pencil, and you seemed frustrated. And when I looked around at other children, they were just happy using their pencil. There was nothing bothering them, but you were just sitting there frustrated. So I said it to the teacher at the end of the class. I said, it's funny, Molly doesn't seem comfortable using a pencil. And she says, yeah, I meant to talk to you about that. I think her glasses, the prescription's wrong. I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. She says, maybe on the next visit to the doctor, you could mention that. So the next time we went in, I mentioned it. And there was an intern in, but he seemed very good, but he was right on it. And he said, I think we should do further tests, given that information. That's really good information. So they lined up more tests. And that's when it started getting a little bit more concerning. And he said, either this will be a diagnosis that will be stable, or it'll be a diagnosis that her vision will be depleting. And it was like, oh, that doesn't sound too good. And I remember phoning your dad at work, and his dad had just passed away. And he said, honestly, I just can't handle this work going crazy. I'm trying to figure out, what's going on with my mom after my dad's passed away. And yeah, so that was, I talked to a neighbor about it. Remember Nicole?
Mm-hmm.
She was the school teacher. She says, yeah, no, I've noticed that too with Molly in the dark. And I kind of explained things to her. And I remember just my stomach, that pit at the bottom of your stomach where oh, this doesn't sound good. This doesn't sound good at all. So yeah, it just kind of got really tough from then on in.
Do you remember receiving the retinitis pigmentosa diagnoses? Because again, there was other diagnoses that had come first, the strabismus, the nystagmus, the things that were less impactful. But that retinitis pigmentosa diagnosis was like that missing link, the missing puzzle piece of why is she clingy at night? Why is she knocking things over all the time? Like that was that like, oh, here is the big one. Do you remember what it was like to get that diagnosis?
Yes, because I got a phone call from the doctor, and she communicated that the results of the final testing kind of thing over the phone, and it was frankly kind of devastating. As I said, there was a relief that it could have been worse, but at the same time, when you're finally given a sort of a real diagnosis, say like, yes, we now know what the issue is. A bunch of thoughts, start to flood into your mind instantly. You're not even thinking; it just comes out. And to me, I remember the first thing that popped into my mind, because again, you were still like you were 4.5 years old, and it's the immediate reaction I had, which now looking back at it sounds kind of weird, but it was like she's never going to see her own children, which to me was such a, I guess that was the one thing that initially just jumped in my head, which is the beauty and the special connection of holding your own child, and to suddenly realize just what you would never have that experience. Just was to me the ramification of just how sort of big and important this was going to be in your life.
Which the good news is I don't want kids, so
Yes.
we don't have to worry about that one. And then you did get the news. Dad
Mhm.
got the phone call while you were out running errands.
Yeah.
And you got home. Do you remember him telling you what the diagnosis was?
I do, but at the time we wanted it explained by the doctor, not just over the phone like that. So we had a visit to see her in the hospital. I went in, and yes, we were concerned because I was leaving to go to Ireland the next day. And so the whole time I was in Ireland was not relaxing. It was concerning. I remember crying at one point when one of my aunts came in. I was like, it doesn't sound good. But you have to kind of carry on. So got home, I had an appointment with the doctor, and she apologized for saying it over the phone, but she says, you sounded like you needed to know quickly. And she kind of started explaining everything about the different types of glasses you could wear, which were shaded. She was pulling them out. And I just was feeling like more and more sick, and I just didn't want to hear it. It was just like, I want to get out of this room now. Like, this doesn't sound good. And then we went to another room, and she was showing us more glasses, more devices, and I couldn't take it in. I remember leaving the appointment. I think you were with us. Or maybe that was another time when we met back again for more tests. I remember coming out of the room and just going, okay, we need to deal with this. Like, we need to get things in place right away and just deal with this. Dad was upset at that point, and I couldn't even cry. I was like, no time. Just have to spring into action and find support groups, get as much information as we can, and get the school, let them know. And it just kind of went from there. It was just, that's how I cope, is just taking action, doing things, and not letting myself go into a dark place, because I knew you needed support. And then I just very slowly over 5 years, bit by bit, grieved, but at night, when I go to bed or when I wake up, and so I let it just happen slowly so that I wasn't falling apart. And that seemed to work. So by the time you were at an age where you were asking more questions, I was through it. I was done, and I had my information, and I was able to kind of help you.
What was your journey of processing and healing? Like, did you even think about that, or did you just go into autopilot of like, what's next?
I think it was more of an autopilot. It was, this was, pre-internet days. So there was not, there's no online resources that you could turn to. There was no AI chatbots that you could, run by, to review your feelings and that kind of thing. And they certainly didn't, raise things back in those days about things like, do you guys want to see a therapist or anything like that?
Which is crazy. Like that should be, I feel like step one should be, we want to refer you to family counseling or therapy because getting diagnoses like that is huge.
The one thing we were, extraordinary, and I'm still extraordinarily grateful for, is your doctor at Sick Kids. Used to give us, to this day, I think was the best advice we could ever get as parents. And she was like, your inclination is going to be protective. I think, as parents, you're always a little protective of your children, but she's like, now you're going to get sort of more so. And she said, I encourage you to fight that instinct and let Molly be the decider of what she can and can't do. And we really took that advice to heart. And it's probably, frankly, the best advice we were ever given as parents to enable you to grow into the person you are today and for us to not freak out and kind of cocoon you, which would have just limited your growth and abilities.
I didn't know that that's who gave you that advice, but thank God she did, because I would say, from my vantage point, the best thing you and Mom ever did for me as a blind child was treat me no differently from your sighted son. That was the best thing you did. And obviously that was within reason, right? Like you gave me accommodations when I needed them. And, I was a little girl, he was a little boy. Like there was obviously like certain differences, but for the most part, you treated me the same way you treated him in terms of what you allowed me to do and explore. And in terms of how you built me up of what I could do, what was possible. And I really appreciate that because I think it is the only reason I am who I am today, is that you did not stop me. You did not put limiting beliefs in my head. No matter how scary it must have been at times, you let me go run off and
literally run off and like run into poles or
yes.
be on a bicycle and ride into things. And because you had to be the one to say, okay, I'm not comfortable riding my own bike anymore.
Yeah.
So it was definitely it was painful at times to have to sort of watch it. But at the same time, I think it was incredibly important for you to be the one to be the judge of what you can and can't do. And not for us to put our preconceptions
Exactly.
and misconceptions on you.
Because the truth is, you, like many parents of disabled children, didn't really know much about blindness or disability at all going into receiving the RP diagnosis and being thrust into a whole new world, right? There's a ton of parenting books out there, but there's not much, especially back then, on raising a child who's going to progressively go blind, especially when you have no idea when they're going to go blind. Like there's so much unknown with this diagnosis. Do you remember the first time that I came home and asked a question? Because I remember being in grade 1 and they had started doing some accommodations at school. Like I was writing with a black marker instead of a pencil and had a vision itinerant and an EA that sat next to me. And I used a whiteboard instead of the chalkboard and all these different little things. And then there was the African lion safari trip. And all the kids were going to African lion safari and I was so excited. And then I found out that instead I was going to be going to a picnic with other blind and deaf students in the school board.
Wow.
And
yeah, okay.
That was
That's
the
crazy.
first time I remember kind of like feeling different. Like putting all the pieces together of like, oh, there's like all these like things that I do in school that the other kids aren't doing. But when I realized like I wasn't going to get to do a fun thing because I was going to go do something else. That was like kind of when I realized something was different about me.
Yeah, I thought it was maybe in SK the year before grade 1. I think some questions started popping up. And I remember talking to your doctor maybe some of the staff saying, like, what do we tell Molly? And they were like, just let it go until she gets to a point where she's asking you questions. So we did that. Whether that was right or wrong, I have no idea. And then when we started coming home asking questions was when we, I would imagine, sat down and started explaining it in little pieces, enough for you to be able to absorb. We had you chat with your doctor, I think, who explained it in a more professional way, but like adapted for your age as well. And then from then on, I'm not sure.
I remember learning how to say retinitis pigmentosa
Right.
around 7 years old.
Yes.
And I thought it was very funny that it's Pigman.
Yes.
And I remember getting like a stuffed pig or something.
Yeah, there was a company
Guinea
actually.
pig.
It was I won't say the name of the company, but it was
Like
something
a
to do with cell
phone
phones.
provider.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And it was lovely. They were doing this fundraising for, the
My
foundation.
disease, yeah.
And they had little pigs, stuffed pigs. They were black and white, which was perfect. It was like the contrast.
High color contrast, yeah.
contrast. It was super cute. And yeah, again, I have snatches of memory, but not full memory of things. I just remember going in with you and you thought it was really cute. And you were very accepting. Maybe that's a child thing, Um, y- you were very accepting of your situation when you were younger.
Mhm.
I think it was kind of the middle of grade 1 when it started getting tough. It was more the bullying than
Yes.
the diagnosis that
Mhm.
concerned you. Like, had you gone through school with enough understanding and support
From my peers.
then you would have been probably fine.
Yes. I mean, I often reflect that the hardest part about going blind was my peers, not my vision loss.
Yes.
Because the bullying was so challenging to navigate, especially as a very extroverted, bubbly, outgoing person who like just always wants to be involved. It was very hard feeling like people didn't want me involved, or they would involve me and then be mean to me or leave me behind or not want to support me, like dreaded Halloween.
Dreaded Halloween, and also you couldn't see their faces.
Yes.
You couldn't tell that maybe they were laughing behind your back or they were whispering about you, and I could see it. And that's when it got really tough.
Yeah.
It was the bullying. It wasn't actually, it was the lack of
Support
acceptance and support.
community. Mm-hmm.
That was really, really tough. And I mean, it wasn't only you getting bullied. Of course, there's other children getting bullied.
Yeah.
But when you've got a diagnosis like yours, it's so much worse.
It's amplified, right? Because like you're dealing with consistently changing vision and negative friendship dynamics. It meant that really at school there was like nothing positive happening.
Yes, or
It's like
very little.
hard.
Yeah. And we'd have meetings with the teachers that were supporting you, and their thing was just focus on keeping Molly really sociable because she is a sociable butterfly. Do after school play dates, and which we were doing anyway, but kind of they were really pleased with that about you. And they said like activities after school, which you were doing anyway because you wanted to do everything. Keep those up because that's the balance. When school's tough, you need to have a home life really good and, fun things for her, joyful things that she loves to do. And the summers were always great. It was
Yes.
camps and
Christmas and summer. Those
Yeah.
were my reprieve from school and just
agony.
the hardship
Yeah.
of being a blind person in a visual education system
Yes.
and being a social butterfly who's ostracized. It was a lot. I mean, even not being able to see facial expression and body language as a blind adult is still hard.
Mhm.
And I think people really underestimate how much sighted people use looking at the people around them to adapt and manage their own behaviors.
Mhm.
I remember years ago when I was doing a lot of collabs and people would always comment, she always cuts people off. It's so annoying how Molly cuts people off. but it's because I can't see when somebody's about to speak.
Mm-hmm.
That's a visual cue that everybody else gets that I don't get. And as a natural talker and performer growing up on the stage, you don't want a bunch of dead space. That ruins the like energy, the bouncing back and forth. And so I jump in when there's a moment because I can't see that somebody else was starting to open their mouth or leaning forward or raising their hand in these gestures that say, I'm going to jump in here and talk. Or I would think somebody had completed a thought, but they hadn't. They were just taking a beat to think. And I would jump in because I didn't see that they were just thinking. And it happens in real life, that I speak too loudly because I don't know if somebody can hear me
Mm-hmm.
because I can't see if they're registering on their face. And I struggle in loud environments to hear because sighted people use their eyes to visually pick up a lot of what they're not hearing. So I need things to be louder. So I naturally then speak louder for people because I don't know if they're seeing or hearing because I can't see that they're registering. So all these different things or even little things like I make a joke, but I don't see that the joke didn't land.
Mm.
So I don't know to apologize that I offended somebody because I don't even know that I offended them because I didn't see their face turn. It's really challenging socially when
It's
you
very
can't see.
complicated.
Because
Very
it's
complicated.
being in social settings is an extremely visual dynamic. So it was always very challenging growing up. What for you watching me, and maybe that was it, but what for you watching me grow up was like the hardest moment for you that you can remember in my vision loss journey?
There were actually two. I remember when I went into the school, we were probably in grade 3, and I just popped in a book or something. I was just dropping something off, and I saw you sitting with a vision itinerant teacher that it kind of you didn't gel with, and you were sitting beside her, and you were away from the other children, and I was just like, I think I had a talk with that teacher afterwards that Molly should be integrated with the children, not you sitting beside her. I don't feel that's doing any good for her. And I think they did adjust that actually. And then the second time you were making your communion
Mm-hmm.
and there was a practice and I went in to pick you up after the rehearsal in the church and all the students were on one side and you were on the other with your assistant. And I was like, why isn't Molly sitting with the other children?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why were you separated? That sort of stuff just broke my heart. Like for days, I would be just upset. And again, it's always trying to hide that in front of you and just keep life as jolly or as sane as it could be and happy. So there was a lot of personal agony because I couldn't even say it to your dad who's coming in after a really hard day at work. There were no laptops then, there were no cell phones. So, when he came home, it was often late because he'd have to work late. And so I couldn't unload on him. And there's not many parents that could understand what I was going through.
Mm-hmm.
So I did join support groups and that helped. But again, it's like you're trying to manage the house, everything else, schooling, homework, and then go to a support group. And again, there was no way of messaging. We did have email at that point. But yeah, it's just trying to gather as much information as possible. And then that's when you'd find out about maybe better teachers, EA teachers, and you'd request them for the next year. Could we get this teacher? I think it would be a better match. So it was really useful, but also exhausting, because then you'd go home, get ready for the next day, we had a discussion today about like how busy we were always.
Saying my parents, like never, ever, ever in my childhood did I see my parents sit down and watch a TV show, read a book, do anything for themselves, like all day, every single day, weekend, evening, everything. They were doing everything for their kids and for the house and to keep life running.
Just keep life running and school and homework, and which of course got more complicated as you got older because it was tougher. And yeah, but it's, I guess, devotion.
You're truly like two of the most selfless people I've ever met.
Thank you.
It's good, Neve. You know how many times I've cried on the internet? My God.
True. Now I know why. Now I know why.
Yeah. We had to cut because Neve Burke got emotional.
She complimented me and I'm like, oh my God, please don't say thank you or anything because your situation was so much worse than ours that I was just like, I couldn't give enough. It's like,
But it's true. You're like the most giving, selfless person I know, truly, still. Like you and Dad still, with us in our 30s, will
Molly,
bend
no
over
compliments.
backwards to do anything for us. Like it's incredible. Like I am so immensely blessed, and not a day goes by where I don't realize how lucky I am to have been born into the circumstances I was, because my life has been really, really hard,
Yes.
exceptionally difficult.
Yes.
And I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but I also know that for as much as was taken out of my basket, there was other things put in there.
Mm-hmm.
And not everybody has such an incredible family unit. When I didn't have nearly anything else, at least I had that. And that, thank God, got me through. I mean, it's the only reason I survived, I think, truly, is because I had family who rallied and who made sure that everything that could be put in place would be
Mm-hmm.
when I needed it. So how did you start to learn? Like, where do you even begin when you get that diagnosis to start figuring it out? What are the next steps?
Yeah, it's a good question. Your mom might have better answer to a similar question. Because I said there weren't resources. There was no online resources you go to. It's not like you could open up an encyclopedia and read all about how to parent a child with a disability. So a lot of that stuff didn't actually kind of exist. So it really was kind of winging it, which in many respects maybe not a bad thing, because when you start to say, okay, well, we just have to be parents, you just kind of parent child number 2 the same way you parented child number 1. And you're not sort of layering on all sorts of stuff and knowledge that may in fact affect your decision making. It was kind of flying by the seat of our pants.
Yeah, figure it out as you go. It's
Yeah.
probably like, it's hard to even think because, like you said, not only was there not even Google, there wasn't even like representation in media. Like there was no movies you could just pop in the VHS player and like watch a movie with a blind character represented positively. Like there was really so little. And anything that you could find is clinical, right? Like it's medical, it's not social, it's
Yeah.
not real world. And I'm sure, frankly, a lot of what you could find was scarier than helpful.
Yeah, it didn't necessarily like it's we got involved with an organization that was searching for cures for blindness or hoping to find cures for blindness, but that was more of a faint hope. And it certainly wasn't stuff that was giving you concrete advice as how to act as a parent.
Yeah.
And similarly, like organizations with the CNIB that could come in and give you more knowledge about, what to expect or provide you with resources to help you. Again, it was about giving you accommodations, but nothing about how to be a better parent under that kind of situation. So all those kind of resources just didn't exist.
I certainly had many accidents, but I like to believe that, sighted kids have accidents too. So at the end of the day, you could have shielded me from those accidents, but accidents happen to sighted kids too.
Oh, yeah, for
So
sure. Kids have to be kids.
Kids have to be kids. And you know what? I never fell off the playground swing and broke my arm. I just ran into a fence and smashed my face.
Like your cousin did.
Sighted cousin, non-disabled. Exactly. Like these things happen, right? So I'm curious for you when I was a child, and especially in that in-between where my vision would stabilize and then I'd lose some. And then we'd go to another appointment and it will have stabilized. And then we go to another one and I will have lost more. And it was this constant readapting and figuring out, what accommodations do I need at school? What accommodations do I need at home now that things have changed again? How long will this last? Like what for you throughout those years was like the scariest moment or the hardest moment?
So I think the scariest thing was probably when, again, that we were told by your doctors to kids that because you were diagnosed so young, the impact of RP on you would be earlier and more significant than when, at the time, I'm not sure what it is today, but at the time, people were generally diagnosed with RP in their 20s or even into their 40s, whereas you were like 4.5. So
Yeah.
I think the scariest part was just knowing that it was going to be a greater impact and come on faster. Was probably the scariest thing for us, at least for me.
And to counteract that, what was the most exciting or the happiest moment in my childhood for you?
Well, you were a happy, outward, child who wanted to do everything. Um, and I used to come home from work and stuff, and you used to be the wild woman, right? And we used to play, and we'd tussle and wrestle, and Brady and you would jump all over me and that kind of stuff. And you were a happy, kind of carefree, go lucky kid. I think the happiest, for me was when you started doing the ski hawks. Was it ski hawks?
Yep, ski hawks.
With the sighted guide sort of helping you learn how to ski, because to me, you felt so free on the snow.
Yeah.
Right? Like you were just like everybody else. And it was so happy. And that was a wonderful organization allowing you to go out every weekend and ski. But it was just a real sense of you having personal freedom that you didn't necessarily have elsewhere in your life.
Yeah. Another moment like that in my childhood was getting gypsy.
Yes.
That was another moment of developing a sense of freedom that before getting a guide dog I didn't have. How did you and Mom decide that getting a guide dog for me at such a young age was the right decision? Because I'm sure things like that are really difficult to navigate. It's not like when now as a 32-year-old I go get a guide dog. It's fully my dog, right? But this dog is coming into your family home with another sighted child and with our family dog. And what was the discussion like around, should we let Molly get a guide dog? Is she ready?
Oh, that's such a sweet way of putting it, because that's not my recollection at all.
Oh.
My recollection is you saying, I want to get a guide dog.
And then doing it?
And then, well, us having comfort where, and I can't remember, I think you probably even did all the research yourself, finding out that Mira was the only guide dog school in Canada who would give a child a guide dog if they demonstrated the deed and the maturity to care for the dog. So to me, I mean, if I take a step back, we started you on the white cane. And I remember, again, the doctor ticket saying, it's probably time to start her with the cane. And I think you were in grade 3 at the time. And she said she doesn't really need it now, but she'll accept it. Whereas if you wait a year or two, she'll be at that age where she doesn't want to be different to anybody else at all, and she'll reject it.
Mm-hmm.
So when she really needs it, you'll struggle to get her to use it. So you're better off trying to get her to use it early, which again, in hindsight, was a fantastic decision to do because you did embrace the cane. And then I think as you got to that point where you were probably starting to feel like this cane is making me excluded, the thought of having a guide dog became, I could be more approachable and people wouldn't be, look at me so oddly if I have a dog versus a cane.
Yeah.
But you were really the one who said, like, I want a guide dog. And so for us, I guess in a way, it was one of those things as a parent where it's like, well, the good news is I don't have to say no, because if the school doesn't think she needs one or the school doesn't think she's ready for it, they'll say no.
Right.
But what was terrifying was the idea of having to put you on a train in Toronto by yourself at 13 and send you by yourself to Montreal.
Freshly 13, by the way. Like my birthday was in February and I went on the train in March.
Right. So you're putting a 13-year-old child on a train by themselves to go to Montreal, where they would meet you at the train station and bring you to their school and the facilities. But part of it was, does she have the, common sense, the street smarts to be able to go on a train by herself? So that was a leap of faith for us to be able to go, okay, we just kind of have to let her do this. That part was quite terrifying for me anyways. That was quite scary. And then to have you gone for, I think the first assessment, if I recall, I think you were there for like 4 or 5 days.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And that's when they assessed you and then you kind of came back. And then when they said, yep, she's ready. And you were like, okay, I want my dog. I think you were there for like a month.
4 weeks. Yeah.
Right? And that was also hard because it's like, you're 13, now you're 13 and a half or whatever. And again, we're putting you on a train. And although maybe
I think you drove
I think we were able to
me.
drive you for that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we were able to say goodbye at the school. But then it's like, yeah, we're not going to see you. There were no cell phones back then. It was the odd phone call that we'd get from you.
Yes.
Right. And you would generally be like exhausted because you'd be working really hard at the training. Day in, day out, sunrise to sundown kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So the brief conversations we do have was generally just like you telling us about your day and the dogs you were working with and how tired you were. So as a parent, that was tough to be that far away and to not be able to feel like you were able to provide more support when you wanted to.
And the joy of getting Gypsy and bringing her home was juxtaposed with then what followed, which was the most significant decline in my vision that year. Very fast, much younger than expected, faster than expected. What was that like for you? Because I think if I recall, I used to demand that you came with me to my ophthalmology appointments when I was really young. But the older I was getting, the more routine they were becoming, and you had a busy career. Growing up in our family, we had the kind of classic dynamic of more stay-at-home mom and dad's the provider. And so you were always working really hard, working really long hours. And I remember you weren't able to come to that appointment that year.
Yeah.
It was just mom with me when we found out that I had lost a significant amount of vision, which I had thought that I did. What was that stage in my life like for you? I know it was like a very stressful period with your own career as well.
Yeah, at the time, I remember, again, we used to joke and, at the time about you being raised by a single parent because I'd be leaving the house by 6 a.m. I would often get home at 6:30, 7 p.m. I'd often be coming home, and mom would already have you in bed when you were younger. You'd already be asleep. So she bore, the brunt of all that stuff by herself while I was out working. But at the same time, we were very grateful that we could, my career allowed her to stay at home because, we both believed at the time that you guys would benefit from having a full-time mother, with you. Times have largely, significantly changed since then, but at the time, that certainly felt like the right decision for us to make as a family. At the same time, it was a lot of guilt, I'd say, in terms of not being there, not so much to support you, because there's not a lot we could do in terms of that, but I always felt guilty that, Neve was left having to hear this firsthand and not having anyone with her to support her in the moment. So I kind of felt like I was abandoning not only my children at times, but my wife at times, which wasn't a, particularly pleasant feeling.
I think it feels like, especially in that 2008 period, because it was such a tough time because I was going blind and it was also the economic crash and you were in an industry that was kind of teetering on the edge, and that was a really stressful time. And I feel like definitely mom really bared a lot, that like she kind of like shielded you from a lot of what I was going through in many ways.
Oh, she definitely shielded me through a lot of the emotional stuff that you were going through, because she knew that I wouldn't react well. And she knew, and correctly knew, that my reactions wouldn't do anything to improve the situation.
Right.
So she kept all of that from me. which was, the right decision for her to make at the time, but also much more difficult for me to come to grips with when I did eventually sort of find out various things.
Throughout my childhood, we were, as a family, very involved in research, fundraising for research for a cure. That was a big part of our lives for many, many, many years, over a decade. And then at 16, around 16, 17, I came to you guys and said, I don't want to fundraise anymore. And I don't want to look for a cure. And I just want to move on and accept living as a blind woman. And I understand that from outsiders, that's a very confusing thought, that you can have a disability and decide that you're fine with that and that you don't want cures. What was that like for you as somebody who spent so many years fundraising and supporting me in fundraising, and all of a sudden I'm coming to you and saying that?
So, I think honestly, it was like it felt in many ways that the tables were turning, right? So that the child is now teaching the parent, because it was kind of a confusing thing. But as I sort of thought about it more deeply, I always remember the doctor saying, "Yeah, we think we're going to find a cure within Molly's lifetime," which why raising money to find cures became sort of an important kind of goal or objective. But then as they found out, originally they thought there might be 10 or 12 genes. Then, as they learned more, it's like there are so many genes and there's so many complexities that it felt like you're holding out hope, which is a wonderful thing to keep. But hope can't replace developing the skills and having the attitude to live your life to the fullest.
And self-acceptance.
Yeah. So I think, at the time, I think looking back at it, certainly now, it was like, yeah, like I said, it's like you became the parent teaching us how you were going to sort of accept your disability and move forward.
And the joy of getting Gypsy and bringing her home was juxtaposed with then what followed, which was the most significant decline in my vision that year. Very fast, much younger than expected, faster than expected. What was that like for you? Because I think if I recall, I used to demand that you came with me to my ophthalmology appointments when I was really young. But the older I was getting, the more routine they were becoming, and you had a busy career. Growing up in our family, we had the kind of classic dynamic of more stay-at-home mom and dad's the provider. And so you were always working really hard, working really long hours. And I remember you weren't able to come to that appointment that year.
Yeah.
It was just mom with me when we found out that I had lost a significant amount of vision, which I had thought that I did. What was that stage in my life like for you? I know it was like a very stressful period with your own career as well.
Yeah. At the time, I remember, again, we used to joke and, at the time about you being raised by a single parent, because I'd be leaving the house by 6 a.m. I would often get home at 6:30, 7 p.m. I'd often be coming home, and you guys, mom would already have you in bed when you were younger. You'd already be asleep. So she bore, the brunt of all that stuff by herself while I was out working. But at the same time, we were very grateful that we could, my career allowed her to stay at home because, we both believed at the time that you guys would benefit from having a full-time mother, with you. Times have largely, significantly changed since then, but at the time, that certainly felt like the right decision for us to make as a family. At the same time, it was a lot of guilt, I'd say, in terms of not being there, not so much to support you, because there's not a lot we could do in terms of that, but I always felt guilty that, Neve was left having to hear this firsthand and not having anyone with her to support her in the moment. So I kind of felt like I was abandoning not only my children at times, but my wife at times, which wasn't a, particularly pleasant feeling.
I think it feels like, especially in that 2008 period, because it was such a tough time because I was going blind, and it was also the economic crash, and you were in an industry that was kind of teetering on the edge, and that was a really stressful time. And I feel like definitely mom really bared a lot, that like she kind of like shielded you from a lot of what I was going through in many ways.
Oh, she definitely shielded me through a lot of the emotional stuff that you were going through, because she knew that I wouldn't react well, and she knew, and correctly knew, that my reactions wouldn't do anything to improve the situation.
Right.
So she kept all of that from me, which was, the right decision for her to make at the time, but also much more difficult for me to come to grips with when I did eventually sort of find out various things.
Those were two of the hardest moments for you, which is interesting because both of those involve just seeing me be isolated.
If you ask me give me one word about my fears, there's one word: isolation. That was my fear, because I realized, hold on a sec, she's getting more and more isolated. That's terrifying for somebody who is bold and has confidence and is fearless. And that's what got us through. And especially for me, I think being with you so much is watching you. Like you say, oh, you gave so much, but actually we learned so much from you, and you gave us so much, and you made us stronger, made us grow, and you took our ego away. Does that make sense? Because we were free from our own ego. Well, I can speak for myself, I guess. It's like my ego went away and my focus was just you, and admiring you and feeling what a wonderful person you were, even as a small child, and how strong and brave you were, and how I didn't know how you would get up in the morning, especially as you started entering teenage years. I'm like, how does she get up, and how does she face the world again? And my heart would just bleed for you. And I just felt everything you would feel. Like, I just felt so connected to you, but it was so much harder for you. That's why I was able to just put myself literally on a shelf and say, I'm devoting myself to this, because I can't get through each day without knowing I've done the best I can to make your day a little easier, your path a little bit better, to give you hope for the future. And it just made me grow immensely.
It's so interesting because hearing you say so much of that, like I see myself in you now. Like I see, and of course, I mean, we are so similar in so many ways. The type of fashion we like, the way we like to eat, like we have so many with the same
Commonalities,
person.
yeah.
But like it's interesting because as I hear you describe you watching me, and like the way you just had so much empathy that you just had to act on it. Like that's how I feel now with the work that I do.
Yeah.
I feel like I am so blessed and so fortunate to be in the position that I am, that what drives me is knowing that so many in my community who deserve this too are not there.
Mm-hmm.
And like that drives me.
Mm-hmm. And the divisiveness, the politics behind it all. It was crazy, you need to get on with the teachers, honey, as opposed to, which I didn't have a difficult time with at all. I loved using honey because we appreciated them so much, but you had to play that role too as a very small child, and you had to be able to communicate with your teachers and have them on your side, which is a very difficult thing for a child to do, but you did it, and you did it really, really well. But there's so many complications in this world around this disability growing up that it's I used to say it's like playing a piano. There's so many keys that you're trying to hit on every day to make the tune. Or it's like gardening and trying to get rid of the weeds to make the flowers grow. I had to have visual things that would help me get through the day. And if that sounds bizarre because I've kind of got a creative brain, but that's how it felt. It's like there's so many keys to play to get through that day, to
Mhm.
make it just somehow manageable.
Yeah, I really, my childhood was so hard. The best part of my childhood was, as we said, summers, Christmas,
Yeah.
being at home, like when I was not out in the world. But the
Yes.
moment I left and I was out in the world, school in particular, it was very challenging. And I, in many ways, don't feel like I had a childhood. Like
No,
I had to grow up
you didn't.
so fast. And
Yeah.
that is in many ways why I don't want kids. Like I feel like my adult life is for me.
Mhm.
Like the way most kids got to have like a carefree, playful, fun childhood where they didn't have to think about heavy, hard things that you have to deal with as an adult, like taxes and
Mhm.
career and health insurance. Like my adult life is for me to get to just
Be yourself.
be, and like not have to deal with the dynamics of dealing with my teacher and advocating for myself and socially and changing schools to get better supports. And now this accommodation doesn't work anymore. So I have to learn a new computer program or
Mhm.
a new way of doing homework and just going, okay, good. Now go to the hospital and get this test and talk to the doctor about your vision loss and how much you lost now. And it was just so much.
And everything, like we were even told, like Molly will need to be kind of amazing to be accepted. Luckily, you were. So it was just watching you really like, what does she like to do? Because that's a huge fear, right? Like, what can Molly do? And then this is back when there was no research on the internet. There was no books to read about it, or very, very few, so limited. I mean, it's so much better now. There's so much information, but it really was just going through in the darkness for us too. It was, and I'd ask the doctor, like, can you provide another parent's name who maybe I can get in touch with, who could kind of give me some clues along the way? And she said, every single case is so unique.
Yeah.
There's no one I can really connect you with. And there was one mom, thankfully, and she was doing a lot of fundraising. So that gave us an outlet, and meeting that mom was really helpful. And it was just it's so complicated, the whole situation. I wish so much I could just keep you home and homeschool you. But that would have robbed you of all the things, all your strength and all the experiences that you can now share. But if I could have, I would have.
Well, and also, I needed somebody who could teach me Braille. And I
Exactly.
needed these other things that homeschooling a child who's progressively going blind is, again, just another like complication. And it is true, like when you mentioned the support groups, I think when I think of the blind kids that I knew, they were all so different to me and to each other. They were at different stages in vision loss. They had different needs. They had different personalities. So I could imagine even when you are trying to find that support network, it is so difficult because even for me, I can meet 10 people with RP whose stories are all entirely different from one another's.
Mm-hmm. Hey, to be honest, when teenage years came, we were isolated together for years.
Mm-hmm.
We would do everything together, go for coffees, go for
You were my
shopping
best friend.
expeditions. Yeah, we just we became best friends, and we always got on, but it really kind of solidified us. So it was always very easy to work with you because I always knew what you were thinking. Our brains were just connected. It was, it was pretty amazing. And we had amazing times as life went on, but that was more when you were free of school.
Yes.
When you had your own business, things got so much better then. But still, like a lot of explaining, a lot of having your own business is like having a baby. It takes day and night to get that business going,
Mm-hmm.
to establish it. It's very tough as well, but very rewarding.
Well, we'll pivot a little bit. 14 came, lost the majority of my vision, and that's when you and I became closer than ever.
Mm-hmm.
I think so I would survive.
Yes.
And I look back now and I think, I don't know how the hell I did it.
I have no idea.
Genuinely, I have no idea how I survived.
I still don't.
I just want to give that version of me a hug because that was a life that nobody should have to live.
No.
And
many going through it in the same situation as you.
yes.
I think it was a little tougher for you, though, because you were outgoing. You spoke your mind. You didn't put up with bullshit, to be honest. You can wipe that out. So that made it harder. You were just so brave. But I always say, if we could just decolor Molly and have her sit in a corner quietly, it would be so much easier. But that wasn't your personality, so we just went with that and just. But
and, other dynamics like being at a very prestigious private school that adds like just an extra layer of dynamics to navigate that are,
unbelievably.
That was really
crazy.
Read more about it in Unseen. Now I lost my vision but found my voice. But my God, that was, added an extra layer of complication on top of an already complicated situation. And, just my vision loss happened much quicker, much younger than expected.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was just kind of like whiplash. And again, really, the social dynamics were
crazy.
One of the hardest aspects of that. And we developed a best friendship, and that carried on throughout, till today, really. But it carried on throughout high school, and eventually, finally, we got me to grade 12, and I was like, I'm not going to university.
And I was like, great.
Yeah, you were on my team.
We can't go to university. It's too much. And your dad and your brother still wanted you to go, but I was like, no, she's not going. And I don't know how we figured out where you did end up going.
Well,
but I remember I'd read a book about it, and I was like, looks like a good thing you might like,
Yeah, the organization.
Yeah. And that was fun.
So I ended up, if you haven't read my book, I ended up working at an organization which I refer to as EAO. And I worked there for 2 years at 18 years old. Instead of going to college after graduating, I moved into my own apartment just 4 years after going blind, moved out on my own, and started traveling the world as a speaker for this organization. And it was
crazy.
Not as glamorous as it
sounded
looked on the outside.
But it gave you an amazing training.
Yes.
And again, strengthened you even more. I'd say one thing we did do, that was hard to know at the time, we let you suffer. We were always there, but there were so many times I just wanted to pull you out of situations, but it was like, we can't, because you were just so determined and so, no, I'm doing this. It was like, okay.
I think my life has been a series of hard things. And so I just learned that, that's what life is like. It's just hard.
Yeah.
And you just push through.
Yeah.
And so I kind of just developed, when things get hard, I just have to keep going, which is sometimes a flaw. Sometimes I don't have to keep going, but I think I do.
Because you're programmed from a young age.
Exactly.
Been like that.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's very hard to switch it off.
It is. And it's very hard to not live in a cycle where I anticipate that. Where I'm not, I feel like I'm always in fear of the next shoe drop. What's the next challenge? What's the next hardship? What's the next trauma? I just feel like my life subconsciously taught me that that's just what it's going to be like forever. Forever, I'm just going to have to keep overcoming hard things. And eventually you just get exhausted.
You need to be in a safe zone for quite a few years and just feel, okay, I can relax. I can. And you probably even need more therapy,
Mhm.
Therapy was the best thing you went through,
Yes.
but it probably needs to be ongoing or, get back to it.
Probably forever, yeah, but
Because you're probably at a point now where you can kind of sit back a little bit and kind of go, what do I need to unpack now? What's the next stage I need to unpack? Because it takes a while. I mean, even for me not being here in LA with you, it took a good year for me, like Dad just coming in and going, stop. I'd be like, what do you mean stop? Don't stop. You can't stop. But he just kept at it. And eventually I've started relaxing and being able to sleep better. But there was so many years of no sleep or very, very little sleep, like just on being unable to sleep. I
well, and
guess
you had
it's
nightmares for years after I went blind or after I was diagnosed.
and just being awake and trying to solve the next day's challenges because every day there was a new challenge, like it just never stopped. So you're constantly trying to think, how do I solve that for tomorrow? Like, who do I need to talk to? What do I need to do? What action should I take? Because that was how I got through it, was taking action, just problem solving.
Yeah, you were
Instead of
always a
sitting back,
doer.
yeah,
Mhm.
instead of sitting back and going, oh my God, like this is pointless. It was like, no, I can we'll figure this out. We'll figure out something. But it's very hard to switch off.
Yeah.
Which I think you still find
I
really
struggle.
hard. Yeah.
I struggle to do nothing. I have to always be doing something to feel good.
Yeah.
Like, I derive a lot of my worth from doing things.
Mhm.
I struggle to, like, just say I can, like, if I take a day off, that's very hard for me. I sit in my own thoughts and I spiral and
I'm Yeah, I'm getting a little better at that. Now I realize when I'm really tired, it's like I find it's best to stop and just be bored. And the next day, I've got twice the amount of energy. But there was a time I couldn't afford that time.
Mhm.
And now I can take a bit more time. And, Peter's been a big help with that. But yeah,
For a lot of well, I always say my diagnosis was our family's diagnosis.
what it is.
The whole family goes blind.
The whole family, and it's the same with, I think, any diagnosis.
Yes.
It's
Everybody
is affected.
in their own way.
And even friends,
Mhm. So I think for a lot of it, because you were my person through those very challenging years, it was like every day was just survival.
Yeah.
So I think we were both in survival mode for a really long time.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's hard to
All
get
the
out of
time.
that cycle.
Every year.
Yes.
Yeah.
To let your nervous system rest
Rest.
is very hard to break that.
I think it's probably PTSD. There's probably all sorts of diagnoses that it could be given. But yeah, it's the whole family.
And you were really the one because, you were the one at home with the kids.
Mhm.
You were the one kind of keeping
The ship,
the family together and running the house,
running the show.
which is like a really hard position to be in, to carry all of that and never really take time for yourself. But you were an entrepreneur. You had your gardening business, your photography business. And Dad was always a big believer in women in business.
So good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so supportive.
He was always like in the workforce, at a time when it was not cool. He was always a big champion and cheerleader for women in business and uplifting
women.
female coworkers and really believing in my mom and her businesses. And so when my work at EAO came to a miserable end, you and Dad were both there to say, you can do this on your own.
Yeah.
You had done it. He had supported you in doing it, and you were both like, you can do this. And I wasn't sure I could do it on my own. I was 20 years old, blind, dealing with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, dealing with the loss of my guide dog who died suddenly and unexpectedly. And I was really broken all over again. I say it's like the year that rivaled 2008 when I went blind. Like,
Yeah.
it was the other toughest period in my life. And so I didn't think I could start a business on my own. So I asked if you would come in with me,
Oh, yeah, happily.
and we started the next phase of life started as mother-daughter, became best friends and survival partners, and then it became business partners.
Yeah. And then it became Molly. And honestly, as a family, like if you ask me who led the way in our family, it was always Molly because it's like, follow Molly, follow Molly. Where's Molly going next? It was just, you always had a plan. You're always on to the next thing, way ahead of us. And it was like, okay, just keep running after Molly and figuring out what's going on next, and adapting. But it was great. Like, it was amazing. I mean, we were so fortunate to have you be like that. And it was just get up and go.
So we got up and we went and we started this business. I think it's so funny. I remember when I started to kind of blow up and people would be like, "Oh my God, her poor mother being dragged around with this." And I was like, "Girl, she owns 50%. Calm down.
Yep.
She's
All good.
fine."
All
She
good.
started this business with me.
Yeah.
And you as parents never made me feel like my disability made me less than or my disability would limit me, but society at large did, which you guys also saw, right? Like, being told from such a young age the limited career choices and limited employment opportunities. I mean, I think at one point as a teenager, we were told that, like, the only jobs I could really have would be like a lawyer, somebody who worked at a bank, or a massage therapist.
Don't forget pianos in there.
There you go. It was literally like they gave me like it was like 3 to 5 jobs, none of which I wanted. And so you as parents never made me feel like I wasn't good enough because I was blind, but society at large did, which is why it was so hard to accept that blindness was my reality. But you both tried to always empower me, and I think as a family, we coped a lot with humor, which it mostly comes from you, which I use all the time to this day as a coping mechanism, to some people's confusion. But I think in our house, the other best thing you guys did for me and probably for Brady as well was just like normalize my disability without shame, without embarrassment. Like, you always were so proud of me and never ever made it feel like it was a shameful or negative thing that you had a blind child. Um, it felt like you were always proud to be like, look at how awesome our daughter is, despite the fact that she has to deal with so much inaccessibility and so much ableism and so much challenge. Like, look how awesome our little girl still is.
Yeah, I mean, I never did, like, never had a sense of shame or we should be hiding you away or anything. Like, to me, it was like you were just a child living your life, and you were for the most part, in particular through your early years, a very happy child and very outgoing child, and you wanted to just embrace and do everything, whether it was soccer, riding a bike, learning how to downhill ski, horseback riding. Like, you would just throw yourself into everything. And to me, it was like that was the model of a child just living their life. And that's what as a parent, you kind of guide them, but you don't sort of box them in.
Well, with those limited career paths, obviously, I went a different way. What did you think when I first started pursuing the advocacy work that I did? Because growing up throughout my childhood, I was very much in the public eye. I did a lot of, as we said, fundraising. Did a lot of press. I did the pageant that I won. So I was always kind of pretty out there, and I was always the one pushing to be even more out there. If I could have had an agent for acting when I was 8, I would have. But no. Apparently, Molly couldn't have an agent. So I was always the one pushing for more, and you guys were the ones like, slow down, pull back the reins. But what did you think when I started getting out there and traveling the world speaking and like doing all of these things at just 18 years old that I was being so public with my life and my story?
So that part for me was probably easier to adjust to. Then I had always had this expectation, which you'll probably recall, that you would go to university.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of adamant that, I never believed that you would go to university to get a trade or to learn a particular skill. You go to university to learn how to think critically and how to take a bunch of different thoughts and combine those into your own sort of unique thought. That to me was the power and the benefit of university. And so to me, that was almost like a non-negotiable thing in my mind. And I think you had been chatting with Mom about sort of saying, I have no interest in going to university. I don't want to go. And Mom was left with me saying, Molly doesn't want to go to university. And I was like, well, she has to go to university. She was like, she doesn't want to go to university. I'm like, well, doesn't matter. She'll enjoy it when she gets there and she needs to go. And then I guess I was eventually worn down by the two of you. So then to see you sort of start to turn in a different direction, I think I became okay with it, but I became proud of what you were doing because you were all also very passionate about it. Right. And I was starting to realize that, university wasn't the be all and end all, and it wasn't the answer for everybody. It was a great answer for a lot of people, but it's not a thing that everyone has to do. So as I started getting more comfortable with that, I could see you sort of throwing yourself into your new career, your new goals, and doing it with gusto and with sort of ambition even there. So you were showing ambition.
And then that career path fell apart, and I moved back in with you guys. And I said, I'm going to start a YouTube channel, and I'm going to post videos on the internet. And you said, don't embarrass yourself and ruin your career. And yes.
I don't recall that.
And
Thankfully, I have a bad memory.
And you said, how are you going to make money doing that?
Now, in my defense, I was right to a point, because I do remember, like, you started doing your YouTube things in your bedroom, and that was I had never used YouTube at the time. You did start reading various articles about, like, don't leave your kids alone in their bedrooms with computers because, creepy guys are trying to attack them and that kind of thing. So there was always those kind of fears. And what exactly is she recording on, in her bedroom? And I distinctly remember when we signing you up for your Google AdSense.
Mm-hmm.
And the first check, and I think it was actually a physical check that came in.
It was, yeah.
After like 3 or 4 months. And I think it was something like $40 or $80 or something like that. And I remember saying to Mom at dinner, I was like, well, that's nice. Like, she'll be able to buy a pair of jeans every now and again or a pair of shoes, but like, you can't make a living doing this. Like, this is not, you can't survive doing this. And, once again, you proved me wrong.
And now, Peter Burke, what is your job?
So now my job is to manage your travel schedule and your calendar, invoice your clients, you deal with the lawyers and the accountants, and basically facilitate you, doing your thing.
So it worked out.
It did indeed. I can now gracefully say that I was wrong.
I'm sure, I think as you get older, you realize that this is your parents' first time being parents, and they're also figuring life out as they go. This is your first time being married for 30-something years. This is your first time raising 2 kids. This is your first time being in your mid-60s. Like, every year that passes is your first time doing that too. And we think when we're younger that our parents have it all figured out. And then as we age, we realize the older we get, the more we don't know. And I'm sure a lot of my life was, as you said, flying by the seat of your pants and getting it wrong and figuring it out. What advice would you give to parents who are raising blind or disabled children?
So probably the same advice that we were given by the Dr. Sick Kids, which is let your child be the decider of what they can and can't do. Don't put your fears or your preconceived notions or your misconceptions on them. Let them lead that way.
And you know what? It still to this day pisses me off when people tell me I can't do something.
This is true. Every time they tell you that, you go ahead and go do it just to prove them wrong.
So thank you for instilling that in me from the time I was a little girl. You have
That
no
may
one to
come from
blame
your-
but yourself.
That may come from your mother actually more than me. She's very stubborn too.
It's a good trait. Being stubborn is a good trait if you harness it right. But yeah, I think, and I'm sure it's very hard for you at times because we faced all the accusations and assumptions and misconceptions together. And, when I was younger and I was really outspoken and go, go, go and putting myself out there as a teenager, doing the beauty pageants and doing the fundraisers, and people would say, like, I can't believe her mother is such a stage mom and pushing her to do
Oh
this.
my gosh.
If only they knew.
No, it was all Molly.
I couldn't push. I wanted more. You guys were making me sit down and stop.
Yeah. You don't stop, Molly.
No?
Molly's unstoppable. You just go with the flow. What do you need next? Okay, done. and it's fun, you always made it interesting. And you were a great little personality, and you were so fun to dress and when you were younger and all the way through. And you were just interested in so many things that it was incredible. Like that you would be so interested in makeup, so interested in fashion, so interested in doing things, learning things, doing new things that we were just like, she's amazing. We'll just go along with it. Yeah.
Well, I think my mom is my first biggest fan.
Number one.
I want to step back a little bit because I was so interested in all these things and still am. I always joke that if I find out something's possible, I then want to do it. I just think life is so interesting and I love new experiences, and I always was that way. But that's hard to manage when you're going blind and figuring out how to accommodate and adapt. But you guys always did a great job, like when I had to get pulled out of soccer
Mhm.
because I became a danger on the field, you found downhill skiing for the blind. And when I had to start using a cane, you guys tried to make it a positive experience and do like a fun modeling photo shoot. And you guys were always just finding solutions. What would you say to other parents out there who are trying to navigate how to find solutions, and to parents who, whose child maybe has to start using some kind of mobility aid that changes the social perception of their family as a whole?
Well, again, it was all about you and your personality, and the fact that you wanted to do all these things was just like fantastic. And so it was like, if you want to, like, I am a very determined person, like you, right? If there's something that's needed, I'll just go at every angle and I won't stop till I get it. So that helped. And just phoning around and, researching, just doing everything in your power to reach out, ask for help, find help. I have no problem looking for help. It's necessary. Yeah, just like, it's so much easier now, like with the internet and with other people like you, other creators out there. There's so much that you can learn from all different people. But back then there was like really little. So you really had to push hard. But am I answering your question? No, I'm not. I'm not answering
You're kind
the
of
question.
answering it.
I kind of going off. Can you kind of rope me in? Because, I need to be roped in.
Elton just did a big sigh.
He says, oh, here she goes.
He says, ask my grandma.
That's her. Yeah.
For parents who, I kind of asked you two questions, so I kind of made it harder on you.
Okay.
I'll ask this one. For parents whose child has to start using a mobility aid of some kind, whether that
Mhm.
be a walker, a wheelchair, even if it's just a hearing aids, something that now visually identifies their child as disabled in society.
Mm-hmm.
That changes the dynamic for the whole family, but especially for that disabled child who
Mhm.
now is publicly identifying as
Yes.
disabled. You guys navigated that, which for us, it happened overnight.
Yeah.
Right? I had my accident, and all of a sudden, next day I went to school with a cane.
Mhm.
That was a big change for
within
everyone.
weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you guys ended up planning a photo shoot because I always wanted to be a model and I loved fashion. And the caveat was the photo shoot was with the cane as my prop. And that was your way of kind of creating fun out of a hard moment. So what advice would you give to parents navigating that transition within their family and with their child of needing to use a new assistive device?
Firstly, you need to be leading that situation and you need to accept it, even though it's really, really tough. But you have to pull your own feelings back because the important thing is for the child's future and the future of their life that they learn all the skills that they need. And it doesn't mean I didn't have a hard time with it. I had a really hard time with it, but it had to be done in amongst all the other things that were going on at the time. And yes, but you just have to step aside and put your own ego, your own emotions, and it's about the child going forward. So finding them everything and anything that they need, and don't hide it. Just put it out there, put it out in public, and then deal with it.
Please don't hide it from your child.
No.
I think there's nothing worse, and I understand the idea of wanting to protect your child. But at the end of the day, with a progressive diagnosis in particular, there is no protecting them. It's happening. And when you hide it, you take away community, you take away support, you take away identity, you take away a period of adaptation. You also make it feel like there is something to hide.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a negative thing and that's why we hid it. And you guys never made me feel like my blindness was a negative thing, even though society maybe at times certainly did. Throughout my childhood, we were as a family very involved in research, fundraising for research for a cure. That was a big part of our lives for many, many, many years, over a
Yes.
decade. And then at 16, around 16, 17, I came to you guys and said, I don't want to fundraise anymore. And I don't want to look for a cure. And I just want to move on and accept living as a blind woman. And I understand that from outsiders, that's a very confusing thought, that you can have a disability and decide that you're fine with that and that you don't want cures. What was that like for you as somebody who spent so many years fundraising and supporting me in fundraising, and all of a sudden I'm coming to you and saying that?
I remember just going, what? Thank you. It was just, you explained it to me, and I was like, that makes so much sense. And it just felt like this huge weight was gone. We don't have to do this anymore. We can focus now on the things you like to do, need to do, instead of devoting so much time to raising funds or whatever. So, and it felt right. It just felt right. Like nobody had ever said anything like that before. And it was like, thank you. It was just such a relief.
I think honestly, it was like it felt in many ways that the tables were turning, right? So that the child is now teaching the parent, because it was kind of a confusing thing. But as I sort of thought about it more deeply, I always remember the doctor saying, "Yeah, we think we're going to find a cure within Molly's lifetime," which why raising money to find cures became sort of an important kind of goal or objective. But then as they found out, originally they thought there might be 10 or 12 genes. Then, as they learned more, it's like there are so many genes and there's so many complexities that it felt like you're holding out hope, which is a wonderful thing to keep. but hope can't replace developing the skills and having the attitude to live your life to the fullest.
And self-acceptance.
Yeah. So I think, at the time, I think looking back at it, certainly now, it was like, yeah, like I said, it's like you became the parent teaching us how you were going to sort of accept your disability and move forward.
What was the best part about your journey raising a blind child?
There, there was
There was a lot of hard stuff.
a lot of hard stuff, but there's a
So,
lot of fun stuff. I mean, again, your personality was great. Like you were funny and chatty and a little personality. Like you were just so fun to hang out with. And take away all the bad things. It was just fun. And there was a lot of humor, like, because, Dad's really funny and he kind of set the tone there and just kept the energy elevated even when it was tough. There was just a lot of humor and fun and we love to have a good time too and party. And so we brought a lot of that into the house, community and partying and having a good time. And so there were like many, many, many good times. It was the school days that were always tough and teenagers, but we'd always kind of manage to sneak away to a bedroom and have a giggle and a laugh and plan out the next day or what you want to do the weekend and yeah, it was good. I mean, you kept us entertained. Let's put it that way. There was always something new going on.
I was always an entertainer, born entertainer.
Kept us entertained. So, yeah. No.
What is it really like being Peter Burke? What is it really like being the parent to a blind daughter?
Well, it's now that we're gotten through a lot of the painful parts. There could be some down the road, but who knows? But it's now just more of an adventure. It's like, what's she going to do next? What is she going to achieve next? What impact is she going to have on the world next? So it just makes me immensely proud, to be honest. And I'm glad to play a small part in being able to support your success and your future goals because, I've always told you this from the very beginning, which is, don't be afraid to have people supporting you in your business in a capacity because all good business people focus on what they're good at and they get other people around them to do all the stuff that gets in the way of them being successful. And you've done that very successfully. You sort of said, no, I know what I'm good at and that's where I'm going to focus my energies. And yeah, if I don't cook and I don't clean or I don't do other stuff, that doesn't mean I'm not a capable individual. It just means I'm focusing my energies on building my business and having the greatest impact on the world. And I don't have to do everything to the best of my ability. And everyone else does that. But for some reason, I don't know, to be honest, whether it's because you have a disability, because you're a woman and society still has some weird stuff about that, whether those are, preconceived notions that people put on you as opposed to others. But it always strikes me at all that no one complains when a billionaire like an Elon Musk has a cadre of people who do everything for them. They don't say he's a failure or he's not able to do it by himself. They just think he's a smart businessman. But if anyone else does it, it's almost like, well, why can't she do this? Why can't she also do that? Which just to me is just nonsense.
Preach. Thank God. This is why they're my parents and this is why I'm who I am. Because growing up, I often talk about this with my partner. Another amazing thing that you did for me was like, you really kind of created me into an entrepreneur. Like you were always practicing like how to shake hands. And you'd be like, no, not like that. It's a wet fish. Nobody wants a wet fish handshake. Or you were helping me learn how to write a business email, like a professional sounding email when I was in high school to my boss when I couldn't go into work that week. Or like you were always really giving me like these important lessons as a child for when I grew up to be a business person. And that was one of those lessons when I was in high school. I remember you teaching me like, you don't have to be perfect at everything. Pick your thing. Work really hard at that and then delegate outside of that. And you and Mom have always supported me so much in pursuing my path, even when you had concerns or when you doubted. um, and yeah, I really appreciate it so much.
Well, it's more credit to your mother because I live in dire fear of her. So if I were to put my foot down, my life would have been miserable.
Now I'm going to ask you an awkward question. If you had a magic wand and you could rewrite our life as a family, would you have wanted me to be born sighted?
Hmm. So, no. But the short answer would be no, only because as I've gotten older, I've realized that everyone has their own kind of path, their own journey. And your lived experience, whether you have a disability or not, everything that you encounter throughout your life, every challenge you have, every success you've achieved, makes you who you are. Right. So I look at you today, and I'm immensely proud of you. And you've done an incredible job in terms of carving out your own niche, and now you're giving back in so many ways by empowering others and showing others that there is life to be lived richly and vibrantly despite having a disability. That it just goes to show that again, you can preconceived notion saying unless you're fully able, you're not going to have a rich, full life. And that's just not true. In fact, in many ways, you have a richer and fuller life because you have to work harder, you have to strive harder. So when you achieve those great goals, they're that much more meaningful than if for somebody who might just have had it handed to them on a silver platter. So I guess, the short answer is, no, I wouldn't. Like, to me, it's like you are who you are today because of all the experiences and everything you've had to go through and overcome.
And I think there's no right or wrong answer, to that question. I think I feel the same. I wouldn't want to go back and do it all again, but I wouldn't change it for where I am today. But I could also understand if somebody said, I watched you go through a lot of pain, and I still see you have to struggle today because of the way the world views you. And I don't wish that pain on my child. I don't wish that hardship. So I could see parents feeling either way, and I think either way is justified. But I'm certainly content in who I am today. And who I am today is a result of my disease, my lived experience, and of my incredible parents. And I think what I'm very grateful for is that I can say my parents are also my best friends. And I think you and Mom did a great job raising Brady and I um, as friends. And I don't think that necessarily that dynamic works for every parent and child. You know your child best, but
Right.
I think in our family unit, it worked really well. And we're all still best friends to this day. We all still share our same dark humor. And, you and Mom work full time along with my business and have supported every crazy dream I've thrown out there. And I think at this point, I finally wore you down enough to believe that when I say I'm going to do something, I will do it.
True.
I'm going to ask you an awkward question now.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no right or wrong answer.
Or I may not answer.
That's not an option. You got to answer an awkward question, Neve.
Okay.
If you could wave a magic wand and make me sighted and take away my whole past, if you could just have a sighted child, would you?
Yeah, I would have to say yes. Had there been a cure, it would have been amazing. And I do hope for children going forward, or adults, or whoever, that there is something, because it is a very tough journey. And yes, you can learn a lot from the journey, and there's there's good times, but overall it's very difficult. Yeah. So yes, I would take it all away.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes me emotional. Whew.
You want me to cut?
That's okay.
But I'm so happy with how you've progressed and how you've accepted and the amazing life you've made for yourself and the incredible experiences. And that is the upside of being unique, is that you have so many stories to tell and to share. And I'm just so proud of the work you do. It's incredible. And to be honest, you were born for this. There was nothing that we could have changed, because you're a beacon in the world. And I'm sorry if that offends anyone, but I think you're amazing. And I couldn't be more proud, and we couldn't be more proud of you. And despite this awful, terrible struggles you went through, you just kept coming up and making lemonade out of lemons. You just kept doing it, and you never stopped. It was like incredible, and it just made us grow as people. So thank you.
That's my next business. I'm going to start a lemonade stand when all this goes to shit.
And it won't.
I'll keep making lemonade.
You will never stop, Molly. You won't.
I can't.
It's not
That's
in
the
you.
problem. I can never retire. But no, it makes me emotional because I wouldn't change a thing. But life's hard, you know?
Oh, trust me, I would love you to have a cure now. I would. But it's so important to accept what we have, to have gratitude for all the amazing, people along the way, because there were amazing people, there were amazing teachers, there were amazing communities. And along the way, we met such interesting people, other parents, the kindest workers that were there for children like you. We kind of went into a very enriched world, like very unique. Like when I compare it to everyday life, it was just quite an amazing
It
experience.
was in no way
A
standard.
very tough experience, but it's I've so much gratitude for all how you turned out at the end of the day, and how you just persisted, and the people we met along the way that you got on your side to help, to whatever,
Well,
there were many, many, many blessings. Many.
there was, and that's what I focus on is, I always acknowledge my life is harder because I'm blind. I'm not going to pretend it isn't. It is.
Yeah.
But it's also more beautiful
It
because
is.
I'm blind.
Yeah.
And so, with the good comes the bad. It's the bittersweet. It's the duality. It's what Unseen, my memoir, is all about. It's that my life has been extraordinary.
Yes.
Our life has been extraordinary. It's been extraordinarily painful and hard and awful
and amazing
and incredible and amazing and blessed.
Amazing. So elevated, so amazing, so creative, so we're just so blessed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So blessed.
All right.
You,
I think
Molly.
there's no better place to end. We're so blessed. It's hard, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
And,
gratitude, community, persistence, taking action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love you.
Well done. Love you. Put out your hand, Molly. Love you.
Okay, that was an emotional one, you guys. I honestly feel like there's so much more we could have and should have covered. This conversation with both my parents could have been hours and hours and hours long, but let's be honest, I know you wouldn't sit through that, so we had to cut it somewhere. But if you would like me to do a part 2 of this, please let me know and leave your questions for my parents down in the comments. And please also let me know who you would like to hear me interview on the podcast next. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time. Well, actually, I won't, but you know what I mean. Bye.